Hello and welcome to It's a Code You mental health support for those working in healthcare. This is a podcast created for healthcare employees to explore not only issues relating to mental and emotional health, but also unique challenges that those working in healthcare are faced with. Your hosts are Adina Tucker, a licensed clinical social worker with Dartmouth Health, and Jennifer Hinsey, an MSW also with Dartmouth Health. Hello, and welcome to It's a Code You. And on today's episode, we are diving into a topic that resonates with so many of us, and that is mindfulness for the anxious brain. And anxiety is something that most people experience at some point in their lives. For some, it's a passing feeling, but for others, it can be overwhelming and persistent. And if you've ever felt trapped in a whirlwind of racing thoughts, you're not alone. Our brains are wired to react to perceived threats. It's a part of our survival mechanism. And according to neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, the brain constructs responses based on predictions to ensure survival, making threat detection a deeply ingrained process. But in today's world, those threats aren't often life threatening at all. They're deadlines, social pressures, or even our own self critical thoughts. So, mindfulness offers us a way to step out of that whirlwind. It helps us notice our thoughts without becoming entangled in them. And today, we are going to discuss how mindfulness can specifically benefit an anxious brain.
So let's start with the basics. Mindfulness is the practice of bringing your full attention to the present moment without judgment. Sounds simple, right? But in practice, it can be challenging, especially for those of us with anxious minds that love to dwell on the past or worry about the future. One way to think about mindfulness is like this. Imagine you're standing on the side of a busy highway. The cars whizzing by, there are your thoughts. Instead of running into traffic to stop or chase after the cars, you just stand back and simply watch them go by. This is mindfulness, observing without reacting. Research shows that mindfulness can actually rewire the brain. A neuroimaging study done in 2011 found that consistent mindfulness practice leads to changes in brain structure, particularly areas associated with emotional regulation and self referential processing. It increases activity in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation. At the same time, it can reduce activity in the amygdala, and that's our brain's alarm system that triggers anxiety.
I really like the visual of mindfulness being like standing on the side of a busy highway. That's very good. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that myself for people. So let's talk about why is mindfulness important for anxiety? It's because anxiety thrives on avoidance and overthinking. And when we're anxious, we often try to push our uncomfortable thoughts away, but that can make them louder and more persistent. So, mindfulness teaches us to sit with our thoughts and feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, without judgment. Let's try a quick mindfulness exercise together. Wherever you are right now, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Let's do that again. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Now, gently bring your attention to the sensations in your body. Notice how your chest rises and falls with each breath. Notice the points of contact between your body and the surface you're sitting or standing on. If your mind starts to wander, gently bring it back to your breath. Now, take a second and think about how did that feel? Even a short practice like that can help anchor us in the present moment and create a little more space between our thoughts and reactions. I think that's a really good explanation. That's how I try to always explain it is like we're trying to create a pause between those automatic thoughts and then what we do with it so that we take a second and be like, okay, wait a minute. I like that.
Yeah, and focusing on our breath for a moment really is a simple way to tap in and get present because, hey, we're all breathing out here, right? So, great way to practice this, even if you only have a few minutes or a few seconds of time to do it. So now let's explore mindful somatic techniques and why they can be especially effective for calming an anxious brain. Somatic techniques are practices that involve reconnecting with our body to regulate our nervous system. According to two researchers, Levine and Frederick, in 1997, somatic techniques help release trauma and anxiety that is stored in the body. It does this by engaging the parasympathetic nervous system to promote a sense of safety and calm. Now, you might be wondering, what is the parasympathetic nervous system? Well, it's actually one of the two main divisions of the autonomic nervous system, which is often referred to as the rest and digest system because it helps our body conserve energy, it promotes relaxation, and it supports recovery. We could also call the parasympathetic nervous system the PNS. Now, the PNS, it's a counterbalance to the sympathetic nervous system, which is our body's response for fight or flight during stress. It's a good thing to activate our PNS because it helps slow our heart rate, lower our blood pressure, and it allows our body to focus on maintenance and repair. Anxiety often lives in the body as tension, a rapid heartbeat, or shallow breathing. And when we engage in somatic practices like mindful movement, deep breathing, or grounding exercises, we help signal to the brain that it is safe to relax. One of the reasons somatic techniques work so well is because they bypass the thinking brain, which is often overactive in people with anxiety. Instead of trying to think your way out of anxious thoughts, you're using your body to create a sense of calm instead. This can be more effective because it taps directly in to that parasympathetic nervous system, which again, it's responsible for our body's rest and digest response, slowing down. For example, grounding exercises like pressing your feet firmly into the floor or gently tapping different parts of your body can help bring you out of your head and into the present moment. Even something as simple as placing a hand on your chest and taking a deep breath can activate the vagus nerve, promoting that sense of safety and calm. These techniques remind your brain that it doesn't need to stay in fight or flight mode. By engaging the body, we can calm the mind more effectively than through thought alone. Research by Ogden in 2006 shows that somatic practices help regulate the autonomic nervous system, and this plays a key role in reducing anxiety symptoms because, again, it shifts our body from that state of heightened arousal to one that is calm.
So, next, we're going to talk about something that I try to use a lot, which is using mindful humor to help an anxious brain. So, this is something that might not immediately come to mind when we think of mindfulness, and that's humor. But believe it or not, incorporating humor into your mindfulness practice can be a powerful way to ease anxiety. Mindful humor is about finding lightness and laughter in the present moment. And there was some research done by Dr. Lee Burke and Dr. Stanley Tan in 2006 at Loma Linda University that highlights that laughter reduces stress hormones and it increases endorphins, which can improve overall mood and well being. And it's not about dismissing or minimizing your feelings, but creating a little space for joy and levity, even in difficult times. For example, when you catch yourself in an anxious thought loop, imagine your thoughts as a comedy sketch. Picture yourself as the star of an over the top sitcom where everything goes hilariously wrong, but in the end, you always come out okay. Laughter can also help release tension in the body and lower cortisol levels, which are often elevated during anxiety. So you could try seeking out humor intentionally, watching a funny video, reading a humorous book, or even practice laughing for no reason at all. It might feel silly at first, but that's kind of the point. Embracing silliness can remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. So here's a quick exercise. The next time you catch yourself worrying about a worst case scenario, add a ridiculous twist to it in your mind. Worried about an awkward meeting? Imagine showing up in a superhero cape. Concerned about a difficult conversation? Picture it happening in song like a musical. These playful mental shifts can help interrupt anxious thought patterns and bring you back to present moment with a smile. For those who I don't know why anyone would know this, but so we are social workers by trade. And so as a social worker, I've had most of the types of jobs you can have as a social worker, including presently as a therapist and training as a therapist. But I have also worked some of the grittier social work jobs. And early on in my career, an older social worker was making some sort of very dark humored joke, which I found funny. But that's because of how messed up my family is with their humor. So turns out I was perfect for this profession. But she said to me, she looked at me, she said, "Listen, you're going to see and be privy to a lot of really hard things. And so you got two choices. You can laugh or you can cry." And so I started from that point, like really trying to use humor when, because there are a lot of situations, and I mean, in lots of jobs, even especially healthcare, where you are seeing like some really scary things or some things that just like really hit you with empathy and are heavy. And so even using humor in those situations, other people outside of the profession may not understand it, but it really is like a good coping mechanism.
It is, yeah. I've always thought humor is a way to soften the harsher edges of life, you know? Bad things can happen sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
good. Well, now let's get into some practical exercises, some ways to incorporate mindfulness into your daily life, especially if you have an anxious brain. First off, mindful breathing. So, as we practiced a little earlier, mindful breathing is one of the easiest ways to ground yourself in the present moment. Try doing it for just 1 minute when you feel anxious. There's also the body scan, and this involves mentally scanning your body from head to toe, noticing any areas of tension or discomfort. It's a great way to reconnect with your body and step out of anxious thoughts. Mindful observing is a good one too. It's where you pick an object around you and you focus on it for a minute. You notice its color, texture, shape, and even how it feels to hold. This simple practice can bring your mind back to the present. Gratitude journaling is a great one. At the end of each day, you can jot down 3 things you're grateful for, and this shifts your focus from what's causing anxiety to what's bringing joy. Now, counting ceiling tiles, it may sound like a bizarre thing to do, but mindfully counting ceiling tiles or engaging in some sort of similar grounding technique. So maybe counting the beams in the ceiling or I don't know, any number of architectural features in a room that might be repetitive. They can calm an anxious brain by shifting focus away from overwhelming thoughts and redirecting your attention to a neutral, simple task. The mechanism behind this lies in how the brain processes stimuli. Anxiety can cause excessive rumination, often focusing on fears and uncertainties. But when we're engaging in mindful tasks like counting, it activates the prefrontal cortex. Again, that's the part of the brain that's involved in attention, problem solving, and regulating our emotional responses. This helps distract from the overactive fight or flight response. Additionally, the repetitive nature of counting can produce that calming effect by triggering, like we talked about earlier, the parasympathetic nervous system. Again, that is our rest and digest system. It can reduce our heart rate, lower those stress levels. And finally, self compassion. When your mind starts spiraling, try to speak to yourself as you would a friend. Replace harsh, critical thoughts with more gentle, supportive ones.
These are a lot of really good actionable things that people can try to help with anxiety. And I know we have our self compassion episode that if someone is hearing this and wanting more information on that, they can go back and listen to, because we had a lot of in depth information about how to practice self compassion. And that really is, I'm doing most first and foremost with my anxious. If, especially if we identify what's happening when you're anxious, are you having any negative thoughts about yourself? Are they repetitive Does it seem to be a theme to where when you get anxious about something, it's the same negative thought? All right, let's do a little self compassion first and start working on that. But these are all really good. So this was obviously chocked full of some information, some really good information. And our show notes will have links and information about our sources if you want to dig through some of that and get more information. And like I mentioned, we do have an episode on actually mindfulness and self compassion. So those are all some things. If you want more in depth information, you can look at those episodes. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast and you like it, please do so on whatever your favorite listening platform is. And if you really like it, please send us or please give us a rating and review. If you have any questions or feedback, or if there's something that you feel like would be really helpful for us to cover, you can email us at dhbhs.media@hitchcock.org. And we appreciate you listening and we hope you have a great day.